Life is a strange journey. It gives you dreams when you're young, hope when you're struggling, and memories when you're old. Some people live their lives surrounded by love, security, and comfort. Others, like me, live in the shadows of hardship, trying to find warmth in a cold world. My name is Margaret Maggie Evans, and I am 79 years old. I was born and raised in Cincinnati, Ohio, but my life took me through many cities, through countless struggles, and through a lifetime of lessons that I carry in my heart. Now, as I sit on this worn-out rocking chair outside my tiny house in Louisville, Kentucky, watching the sun dip below the horizon, I think about everything I have been through. I want to tell my story, not because I expect sympathy, but because I want people to know that even in the hardest times, there is still strength, there is still dignity, and there is still love. A childhood of empty plates and big dreams. I was born in 1945, just after the war, into a family that barely had enough to survive. My father, Henry Evans, was a factory worker, and my mother, Lucille, was a seamstress. We lived in a cramped two-room house on the east side of Cincinnati, in a neighborhood where children played barefoot in the streets, and dinner was whatever could be found that day. I was the youngest of 6 children, and in a house that small, that meant we were always bumping into each other, fighting over space, and taking turns sleeping on the one good mattress we had. Mama worked long hours sewing dresses for wealthy women, and even then, it was never enough. I remember how she would sit by candlelight, her fingers raw from stitching fabric, while I sat beside her, too young to help, but too hungry to sleep. My father wasn't a bad man, but he was a tired one. He worked in the steel mills, and the work broke him, both physically and mentally. He would come home, eat in silence, and fall asleep in his chair before waking up at dawn to do it all over again. Despite the poverty, I had dreams. I wanted to be a teacher, to learn everything I could and help others do the same. But dreams don't fill an empty belly. I was only 10 years old when I took my first job sweeping floors in a diner. I didn't tell my parents because I knew they wouldn't let me, but I wanted to help. The owner, Mrs. Thompson, was kind to me. She paid me 25 cents a day and sometimes let me take home leftover bread. I never knew how much those extra scraps meant to my family until the night I brought home a half-eaten loaf of bread. My mother cried, "You shouldn't have to do this, baby," she whispered, pulling me into her arms. But I wanted to. I wanted to help. Teenage years, learning hard lessons. By the time I was 14, I had dropped out of school. There was no choice. My father had lost his job, and my older brothers had left home, looking for work in other cities. That left me and my 2 sisters to help Mama make ends meet. I worked as a dishwasher, then a house cleaner, and eventually in a textile mill where I spent 12-hour days standing in front of a machine that never stopped whirring, my hands blistered from handling rough fabric. It was in that mill that I learned one of the most important lessons of my life. People will take advantage of you if you let them. The factory owner, a man named Mr. Baldwin, didn't care about the workers. We weren't people to him. We were just hands that kept his machines running. One winter, a young girl named Annie, just 13 years old, got her hand caught in the machine. Instead of calling for a doctor, they told us to keep working. Accidents happen, the supervisor said. I was furious. That night, I told Mama I was going to quit. She grabbed my hands, calloused just like hers, and said, "Baby, we don't have the luxury of quitting." So I stayed, because poor people don't get to walk away. Love and loss. By the time I was 18, I had met Samuel Carter, the first boy who ever looked at me like I was more than just a struggling girl from a poor family. Samuel was a carpenter, strong and kind, with hands that knew how to build things from nothing. We fell in love in the way young people do, fast, recklessly, and without thinking of the future. We married when I was 19, and for a brief moment, I thought maybe my life was finally turning around. We moved to Louisville, Kentucky, where Samuel found good work, and I finally had the chance to go back to school at night. But life has a way of taking away the things you love just when you start to feel safe. When I was 22, Samuel was killed in a construction accident. A scaffold collapsed, and he was crushed beneath the weight of steel and wood. I still remember the moment they told me. I didn't scream, I didn't cry. I just stood there, feeling everything and nothing all at once. We had a baby on the way. I was 3 months pregnant. And just like that, I was alone again. A mother's fight, raising my son, William, was the hardest thing I ever did. I worked as a maid during the day and a waitress at night. Some nights I came home so exhausted that I barely had the strength to hold him. But no matter how tired I was, I always whispered in his ear before he fell asleep, "You will have a better life than me. I promise you." Years passed. William grew up strong and smart. He worked hard, got a scholarship, and became a teacher. The dream I never got to have. The day he graduated, he hugged me and said, "Mom, we made it." But I knew the truth. It wasn't me who made it. It was him. The lonely years. As I got older, I worked less and less. My body wasn't as strong as it used to be. Arthritis made my hands stiff. My legs ached when it was cold, and my eyesight wasn't what it used to be. I moved into this little house in Louisville, where I sit now, watching the world move on without me. William visits when he can, but he has his own family now, his own responsibilities. I never want to be a burden, so I live alone on a small social security check that barely covers food and bills. I spend my days sitting on my porch, watching the neighborhood kids play, remembering when I was their age, dreaming of a better future. And even though life has been cruel, I am not bitter. I have loved, I have fought, I have survived. I may not have wealth, or a big house, or security, but I have something far greater. A lifetime of stories, a heart full of memories, and the knowledge that I did my best with what I was given. As I sit on my small wooden porch, wrapped in an old knitted shawl that I made years ago, I watch the world move on without me. The wind carries the laughter of children playing down the street, and for a moment, I close my eyes, remembering the days when I, too, was young, when life felt endless, and the future seemed full of possibilities. The truth is, getting old is lonely. No one tells you how silent the world becomes when you are no longer needed, no longer expected anywhere, no longer the center of anyone's life. My days are slow, filled with small routines, watering the 2 plants in my window, feeding the stray cat that visits me every morning, and sitting in my chair, watching people pass by. William calls me twice a week. He always asks if I need anything, and I always tell him, "No, sweetheart, I have everything I need." I don't want to worry him. He has a wife now, 2 children, a good job, a mortgage to pay. His life is full, and I am proud of him. But deep down, I miss him. I miss the little boy who used to curl up next to me, asking for bedtime stories. I miss the way he used to run home from school, his small feet pounding against the pavement, excited to tell me about his day. Children grow up, and mothers are left behind. That is the way of life, but knowing that doesn't make it easier. The quiet struggles of an old woman, the winters in Louisville are cruel, and my little house, though filled with memories, is not built to keep the cold out. The heating bills are high, too high for my small Social Security check to cover. So, I do what I have always done. I endure. I layer on sweaters, pull my old blanket tighter around my shoulders, and drink tea to warm my hands. Sometimes I light a small candle and hold my palms over the flickering flame, pretending it makes a difference. Going to the grocery store has become harder. My legs don't carry me as well as they used to, and every step feels like a battle. I take the bus when I can, but on the days I feel too weak, I go without. There are nights when my stomach growls, but I have learned to ignore it. Hunger is nothing new to me. I have known it since childhood, and it has never scared me. What scares me is the silence, the long, empty hours where no one calls, no one knocks on my door, no one remembers that I am still here. The kindness of strangers. One evening, as I struggled to carry my grocery bag home, a young girl, no older than 17, stopped to help me. "Let me carry that for you, ma'am," she said, smiling brightly. I hesitated at first. I have always been proud, always refused help. But that night, I was too tired to argue. As we walked, she told me her name was Lena, and she lived just a few blocks away. She reminded me so much of myself at her age, full of energy, full of dreams. "Do you have grandkids?" she asked. I smiled softly. "I do. 2 beautiful ones, but they live in another state." She nodded, as if she understood something beyond her years. When we reached my house, she placed the bag on my small kitchen table and looked around. "It's cozy here," she said. I laughed. "That's a nice way of putting it." Before she left, she told me, "If you ever need anything, just ask. People like to help more than you think." I didn't expect to see her again, but the next morning, there she was, standing on my porch, holding a small container of homemade soup. "Mama made too much," she said with a grin. "Thought you might like some." And just like that, I had a friend. Finding warmth in a cold world, Lena started visiting me every few days. She would bring little things, bread, fresh fruit, sometimes just a smile. She never made me feel like a burden, never made me feel like a poor old woman who needed charity. She simply talked to me. She told me about school, about how she wanted to be a nurse. "I want to help people," she said. I told her she already was. For the first time in years, I felt seen. One day, as we sat on my porch, sipping tea, she asked me, "What's the hardest thing about getting old?" I thought about it for a moment, then answered, "Being forgotten." She didn't say anything right away, but the next morning she came back with a notebook. "Tell me your stories," she said. "I want to write them down." I laughed. "Oh, honey, my life isn't that interesting." She shook her head. "I think it is." So I started talking. I told her about my childhood in Cincinnati, about my mother's tired hands and my father's silent grief. I told her about the textile mill, about the girl named Annie who lost her hand, and how no one cared. I told her about Samuel, my first and only love, and about the day the world took him away from me. I told her about William, about how he was the best thing I ever did, about how proud I was of him. And as I spoke, Lena wrote, "A life worth remembering months passed. The seasons changed. The cold of winter melted into the warmth of spring. My body grew weaker, my steps slower, but my heart felt lighter." One evening, Lena sat beside me and handed me a small worn notebook. "I wrote it all down," she said. "Your life, your story, so you won't be forgotten." I held the notebook in my trembling hands, flipping through the pages, seeing my life written out in ink. Tears filled my eyes. "Thank you," I whispered. "No one has ever done something like this for me." She smiled. "You deserve to be remembered." And in that moment, I realized something. Maybe I was never truly alone. Maybe, in the kindness of one young girl, I had found the warmth I had been searching for all my life. I may have been a poor woman, I may have struggled more than most, but I was loved. As the days passed, I found myself holding that small notebook like it was my most precious possession. I would sit on my porch, feeling the warmth of the sun on my wrinkled skin, flipping through the pages, reading my own life as if it were a story about someone else. Did I really live through all of this? I would whisper to myself, sometimes laughing, sometimes crying. Lena kept coming by. She brought me flowers one day, bright yellow daisies. "You should have something pretty to look at," she said, placing them in an old glass jar I had kept from years ago. I never told her, but those flowers were the first gift I had received in a long, long time. Memories that still hurt. One afternoon, as we sat outside sipping tea, Lena asked me a question that made my heart ache. "What's something you regret?" Regret. Such a heavy word. I exhaled, staring out at the street. Cars passed by, people walked their dogs, children rode their bikes. Life kept moving. "I regret not saying I love you more," I finally said. She looked at me, waiting for me to continue. "When you grow up poor, life is all about survival. You don't think about love. You don't think about feelings. You think about the next meal, the next dollar, the next winter. My parents, they loved me. I know they did. But they never said it. We never hugged. We never talked about our dreams or what made us happy. We just worked. And when I became a mother, I did the same thing. I spent so much time working, worrying, trying to make sure my son had enough, that I forgot to tell him how much I loved him every day." Lena nodded slowly, her young heart understanding something that most people don't realize until it's too late. "Do you think he knows?" she asked. I smiled, though my throat felt tight. "I hope so." The call that changed everything. One evening, as I sat alone in my small kitchen, the phone rang. It was rare for my phone to ring, and for a moment, I just stared at it, almost afraid to answer. When I finally picked it up, I heard William's voice. "Mom, how are you?" he asked. I closed my eyes, taking in the warmth of hearing my son's voice. "I'm doing fine, sweetheart. How's the family?" He talked about his wife, his kids, work, normal things. I listened, smiling, imagining his life miles away. And then, for the first time in years, I did something I had always been too scared to do. "William," I said softly, "I just want you to know I love you. I always have." There was silence on the other end of the line. My heart pounded, and then I heard him sniffle. "I love you too, Mom," he said, his voice shaking. "I should have told you that more." Tears ran down my cheeks, but for the first time in a long time, they weren't tears of sadness. A life remembered. The months passed, and my body grew weaker. There were days when I couldn't get out of bed, when the pain in my bones was too much, when the world outside felt distant. Lena still came. She would sit by my bed, reading from the notebook she had written, telling me my own stories. One evening, as the sun set and my room filled with golden light, I reached for her hand. "Thank you," I whispered. "For everything." She squeezed my hand. "You're not alone," she said softly. I smiled. For so long, I had believed that my life would fade away quietly, unnoticed. But now, I knew better. Because of Lena, because of her kindness, because of her belief that my story mattered, I would not be forgotten. The days grew slower, and so did I. My body, once strong enough to work long hours in the textile mill, now felt like a fragile shell, carrying memories more than strength. My mind drifted between the present and the past, as if my soul was standing at the door between two worlds. Lena still visited every day. She brought me soup, sat by my bedside, and read aloud from the little notebook she had filled with my stories. Some days I smiled as I listened. Other days I cried. But every time she read, I felt a little less alone. One morning, as the soft winter light filtered through my lace curtains, I woke up to a familiar voice. "Mom?" I turned my head slowly, and there, standing in the doorway, was William, my boy, my heart. Tears welled up in my eyes as I whispered, "You're here." He rushed to my side, kneeling by my bed, taking my frail hands in his warm, strong ones. "Of course I'm here, Mom. I'm sorry it took me so long." I shook my head weakly. "You're here now. That's all that matters." He looked around the small room, his eyes landing on the notebook on my nightstand. He picked it up, flipping through the pages. I saw his expression change as he read. His lips parted, his brows furrowed, and then his shoulders shook. "Mom!" "I didn't know." His voice broke. "I didn't know you went through all this." Lena, who had been standing quietly in the corner, spoke gently. "I just wrote down her stories. I thought someone should remember." William looked up at her, his eyes red. "Thank you," she smiled softly. "She's an incredible woman. Her story deserves to be told." He turned back to me, brushing a strand of silver hair from my face. Mom, I should have come sooner. I should have been here. I squeezed his hand as tightly as I could. Life happens, my love. Don't blame yourself. For a long time, we just sat there, holding hands, listening to the ticking of the old clock on the wall. And then, for the first time in years, I felt like that young mother again. The one who held him as a baby. The one who kissed his bruises when he fell. The one who worked day and night to make sure he had everything he needed. My son was home. The last story I told days turned into nights, and I grew weaker. I could feel it, the way my body was slowing down, the way my breaths were becoming softer. But I wasn't afraid. One evening, as the sky turned a soft pink, William sat beside me, reading from the notebook. "Tell me one last story, Mom," he whispered. I smiled. "All right." I closed my eyes and took a slow breath. Once, there was a little girl who grew up with nothing. No toys, no warm meals, no soft hands to hold. But she was strong. She survived. She worked hard. She fell in love. She became a mother. And though life was never easy, she never gave up. And in the end, she was never forgotten. I opened my eyes and looked at my son. Because of you, because of Lena, I know my story won't disappear. A tear slipped down his cheek as he leaned forward, kissing my forehead. "I love you, Mom," I smiled. "I love you too, my boy. I always have." And in that moment, I felt at peace. I had lived, I had struggled, I had loved, and I knew that even after I was gone, my story would live on,